local people, important issues. CBS 10 WILM's weekly focus on the Lower Cape Fear region. This is Byline Wilmington with your host, Don Ansell.
Welcome and a very good morning to you. Well, today some compelling stories about heart health issues. Our first guest is a well-known president of a public relations agency. She's also a high-powered political operative who lost her husband suddenly to a fatal heart attack. She's the chair of this year's Cape Fear Heart Walk. Louise Bacall joins us for our first segment here on Byline Wilmington.
Hey,
Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you for having us.
I've been trying to get you on for years and on political issues, and
I stay away from that.
on air.
On air.
I know what you're doing behind the scenes, but so many people know you. You've been so active, your career and the work you've done regionally, locally, around the state. But not too many people know much about your personal life. You were married, and I don't think most people know that, but then you were widowed. How long had you been married?
I was married for 19 years.
19 years?
I dated him for 2 years. We got married, and then we married 19 years.
And just to go back, how'd you meet?
Blind date.
Really?
His cousin asked me if I'd go out that night, and I did. And both of us went home that night, and I told my mother, and he told his best friend we were going to marry each other.
Get out of here.
And 2 years later, we did.
Really? So you dated for 2 years, and then you married. And you were married for 19 years. So tell us what happened.
Well, it was on Thanksgiving Eve. He had been sick a couple of weeks prior, and it was right after the 88 elections. And then evidently he gave me the flu. So on that day, he came home to bring some soup.
This is Thanksgiving Day?
Thanksgiving Eve. So he came home, brought me some soup. He had also been to community college to take real estate classes, and he had also helped me in the 88 elections because I was party chair. So I'd bet him he didn't pass. He bet me he did. He opened his grades and he made 3 A's.
Wow.
So he left, kissed me twice, came back and kissed me again, went to work, called me at about 2, told me he loved me. Called me at 2:30, thought he had my mother's house because she was cooking Thanksgiving and Hal loved to eat. So he told me he loved me again, and 30 minutes later from the office, they called and told me he had passed out. So
From
I
his
didn't
office.
know. Yeah, and so
you got
I
a
didn't
telephone
know
call saying
that
your
he had
husband
passed
out.
And I didn't have a car because my car was in the shop and he had the other one. So I called my mother. And
At this point, did you think it was? Were you worried? I mean, of
yeah,
course you were worried.
Yeah, I was
but
worried
did you think it
because
was
they said the
critical? Or?
No, I didn't know at that time. Now I called back in about 10 minutes, and I told them to take him to New Hanover. And they said they couldn't. They were going to rush him to Cape Fear. So I asked them, was he breathing, and they said that they were trying to get him to breathe. And at that point, knowing the amount of time he had been out, I knew that it was serious. So I called Dan Katobi at the time because I knew he worked at Summit Cape Fear.
That was the local doctor at the time.
And he met me. He come running in, or he was cooking really Thanksgiving dinner, and he said, "I'll be there in a little bit," because I told him they said he had passed out. So when they got to the hospital, he come running in, and from about 2:45 to 4,
in the
they
morning.
tried to. Now this was in the afternoon.
In the afternoon.
They tried to bring him
revive
back
him.
to life. So at 4 o'clock, I told the nurse they could either come out there and tell me something, or I was going back there.
So you didn't know what was going on?
No, they weren't coming out.
As far as you know, he had passed out, and they were working on it.
Well, at 4 o'clock, I figured something. He was probably gone. And
Did you?
Dan came out and told me that he had died. And then I told him I wanted to go see him. And Dan said, "You don't want to see him like he is." And I said I did. So I went back there, to see him, and then we went home. But it killed him instantly.
It did?
Killed it, yeah. Dan
So he hadn't
told me
really
that.
passed out. He had passed away.
Yeah, he had.
But they were trying to revive him, but they told you he had passed out.
Yeah.
And that was how many years ago?
21.
And in a, no pun intended, in a heartbeat, your whole life changed.
My whole life changed. I was 40, and he was 42 when it killed him. So yeah, it really does change your life. I mean, Hal was a good person. I always tell everybody in a marriage, if there's a good and bad one, he was a good one and I was a bad one. But he was a good person.
And how long did it, I mean, it's devastating, it's life-altering. How long did it take you to pick yourself up and move on?
Well, I mean, honest, this is the truth. It was like 7 years. I mean, we had a good marriage, and that's not to say we didn't have our arguments like any marriage, but I went to church one day, and I just asked God to take that off of me. I mean, we both went to Grace Methodist for 30-some years, and when I walked out of the church, he did. I then started realizing all the good things. I mean, I really grieved for about 6 to 7 years.
So it was very hard.
It was hard.
Very, I mean,
and it is even today. I mean.
And you never talk about this.
No. And if I never marry again, I had a good marriage. I could never complain about my marriage.
So how much did you know about heart disease when all this happened? I mean,
I really didn't. Eddie Godwin, which you probably knew at Godwin Lumber, he died the same year as Hal. 42, massive heart attack, killed him instantly, and he was like one of my best friends. And then
were there red flags with your husband? There was none.
No, and Dan talked me into doing an autopsy, and one of his arteries was 98% closed and one was 99. And except for that flu-like period right after the election, which could have been something more than that, there were no symptoms except during the campaign when we look back. Wendy Block and Frank was running
For Senate.
and Wendy was feeding. She and Hal were eating Tums.
Eating Tums,
yeah.
Indigestion, and that
could have been it.
That is a symptom, but it is also not a symptom. People have it all the time.
Yeah.
So, did that fuel your passion to get involved in?
Well, it did, and some of the things, and I think it was when I, was talking to Ashley this year. It was just something that I really wanted to do for me and his memory. I mean, it's not so much he's out there with the heart walk and all, but with me, it's something that I can do in my mind for him.
And when I say this event, it's the Cape Fear Heart Walk, and we're going to talk more about that in another segment. You're the official chair of this year's Heart Walk. It's the major fundraiser for the American Heart Association.
Well, and they also have a heart ball in February with both of them.
Well, we're going to take a little break. I want you to stay around because we're going to talk again to Louise McCall in our third segment. But stay here for our next segment. Two very different but compelling stories about issues of the heart and by people that were not connected and how fate brought them together. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us.